At the family dinner, my parents laughed, "You'll never own a house like your brother." My brother smirked. "She'll be broke forever." I didn't argue, just smiled. 2 weeks later, they came to my house. I said, "Get off my property." It wasn't always this cold. That's the part that sticks with me. The part that makes the silence sting. I remember growing up in that big house in North Hills before the tension set in the house was just loud. It was loud with laughter. I have these fragmented memories of camping trips at Falls Lake piling into our old, slightly rusty van. The air always smelled like damp earth and pine. My dad, Gregory, would be at the front, map unfolded, planning every trail with military precision. My mom, Patricia, would be handing out snacks, worried we hadn't packed enough. My brother Logan was 4 years older, and back then he was my hero. He was the one who taught me how to properly skip a rock, how to make it jump 4 or 5 times across the water. He'd sneak me extra marshmallows for the fire when Mom wasn't looking. We felt like a team back then. Unbreakable. I don't know when it changed. Maybe it was gradual, but it felt like a switch flipped the day Logan got his acceptance letter to law school. Suddenly my parents' world narrowed. It focused entirely on him. Their eyes would light up when he talked about his classes. "He's going to make something of himself," my dad would say, his voice booming with this deep, resonant pride. A pride I'd never heard him use for me. I was proud of him too. At first. Then it was my turn to talk about the future. I sat them down in that same living room and told them I wanted to study fashion design. The silence that followed was heavy. It was a cold, disappointed silence. "That's a hobby, Kelsey, not a career," my mom finally said. Her voice wasn't angry. It was sharp, brittle. Like I'd just broken something valuable. My dad just shook his head. "Be practical," he said. "Look at your brother. Think about business school." I thought I could prove them wrong. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I showed them my sketches, my passion, they'd eventually come around. They didn't. Every phone call home from college became a performance. I'd listen for 10 minutes about Logan's top grades, his summer internship at a prestigious downtown firm, his perfect LSAT score. He was their golden boy. When he graduated from law school, it was like a state holiday. They rented out a private room at the most expensive restaurant in Raleigh. They invited half of North Hills. I was there clapping until my hands ached, smiling until my face hurt, but feeling completely invisible. The following week, they bought him a new car. A graduation present. A sleek black BMW. My dad co-signed without blinking. When I landed my first big internship at a local boutique, a competitive spot I had fought for, I called home, my voice shaking with excitement. My mom cut me off. "Oh, that's nice, dear. Listen, I have to tell you, Logan just passed the bar exam on his first try. Isn't that amazing?" I just swallowed the knot in my throat. "Yeah, Mom," I whispered. That's great." I hung up the phone and didn't call them back for a month. That divide only grew wider. The comparisons never stopped, and they were always public. I remember winning a regional design award in my senior year of college. It was a big deal for me. I'd stayed up for 3 weeks straight, fueled by coffee and sheer willpower working on that portfolio. I brought the small crystal trophy home with me, hoping just this, once it would be enough. My dad glanced up from his newspaper. "Good job," he mumbled. Then literally in the next breath, he turned to my mom. "Patricia, did Logan mention what the closing bonus was on that condo downtown? He's really moving up." The trophy in my hands suddenly felt heavy and stupid. I quietly put it back in my bag and never mentioned it again. I stopped trying after that. I stopped sharing. What was the point? For years I couldn't understand it. I kept thinking, what did I do wrong? Why was I the broken one? Why was everything I loved just a hobby or a failure, while every move Logan made was a triumph? It wasn't until I started therapy sitting on a worn floral couch, much like the one in my parents' living room, that I finally found the words for it. It's a real psychological pattern. It's called the golden child divided by black sheep dynamic. My therapist explained it. My parents needed a golden child. They needed Logan to be their mirror, the reflection of the success and status they craved. He was their proof that they had done everything right. But in that kind of family, if there's a winner, there always has to be a loser. They needed a black sheep. They needed someone to absorb all their disappointment, their anxieties, their own unfulfilled dreams. That was me. I wasn't a daughter. I was a role. I was the artistic one, the dreamer, the one who wasn't practical. It was easier for them to cast me in that part than to actually see me. Once I understood that, everything clicked. All the resentment just dissolved. It wasn't about me at all. It was about them. And that brings me back to that dinner, to that smile. When my brother looked across the table, his eyes flat and bored, and said, "She'll be broke forever," I just smiled. That smile wasn't weakness, it was armor. There's a concept called learned helplessness, but I prefer to call it strategic survival. I had learned over 29 painful years that arguing was pointless. Fighting back only made me the problem. Crying only proved I was too dramatic. So I built a shield. My silence became my power. My smile was the invisible chain of the survivor. It was the one thing they couldn't criticize. The one thing they couldn't take from me. They thought my smile meant I agreed with them. They thought it meant I was defeated. They had no idea that behind that smile I was holding a multi-million-dollar secret. A secret that was about to change everything. Here's the truth they never bothered to see. My little fashion hobby wasn't a hobby. It was an empire. While they were laughing at me over their roast chicken GS, Reed Designs was clearing 7 figures in revenue. My family saw my small rented apartment in Raleigh and saw failure. They saw secondhand furniture and thought struggling. They never saw the truth that apartment wasn't just my home. It was my command center. They thought I was in my bedroom sewing dresses. I was actually in my office, hunched over a laptop, analyzing global shipping logistics, negotiating with textile suppliers in Italy, and managing a fulfillment team that shipped my designs to New York, London, and Tokyo. They didn't know because I never told them. And they never told them because they never asked. The only person who knew the full truth was Chloe, my best friend from college. She's a financial genius, and she'd been my partner from the start. I'll never forget the night she brought over pizza and a bottle of champagne. She pulled up the analytics on her laptop, the screen glowing in my small living room. "Kelsey," she said, her voice quiet with awe, "our revenue just crossed the $2 million mark for the year." I just stared at the graph. 2 million. Meanwhile, my mom had called me earlier that day to ask if I wanted one of Logan's old suits because maybe I could tailor it into something professional for job interviews. I stopped trying to bridge that gap. But that last dinner, that was the breaking point. Hearing Logan's voice so sharp and confident, "She'll be broke forever," it didn't just hurt. It clarified everything. I wasn't angry, I was done. I was done hiding my success to make them feel comfortable. I was done making myself small so they wouldn't feel threatened. I looked at Chloe that night, the pizza sitting forgotten between us. "I'm going to do it," I said. She knew exactly what I meant. The house. The house. I had been saving for years, building my assets, waiting for the right moment. They thought I was broke. They had no idea I had the capital to buy half their neighborhood. It was time to stop hiding. It was time to make my next move. The next 2 weeks were a blur. I executed the plan with the same precision I used to launch a new collection. Everything happened in silence. While my family went about their lives, presumably pitying my failed career, I was in meetings with the most exclusive real estate agents in North Hills. I wasn't just looking for a house. I was looking for a statement. And I found it. A $3 million modern mansion. It was all glass and sharp angles with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. It was minimalist, bold, and unapologetic. It was everything they weren't. While Logan was busy impressing his colleagues at the firm, I was leveraging my business profile, my real one, to secure the financing. The bank didn't see a hobby. They saw a multi-million-dollar e-commerce powerhouse. The loan was approved in 48 hours. The contrast was almost comical. I was in the middle of signing the final stack of mortgage documents, my hand physically aching from my signature, when my mom, Patricia, called. I motioned for the lawyer to wait 1 second and answered the phone. "Kelsey, thank God you picked up," she said, her voice rushed. "Your brother's moving a new sofa into his condo this weekend, and he could really use an extra pair of hands. You're not busy with your little projects, are you?" I looked at the $3 million contract sitting in front of me. "Actually, Mom," I said, my voice perfectly calm, "I am busy. You'll have to ask someone else." I hung up before she could argue. 2 days later, I stood alone in the massive echoing living room. The glass walls reflected the Raleigh skyline. I held the keys in my hand. They felt heavy, solid. They were mine. The housewarming party was the final step. I sent out the invitation's thick, cream-colored cardstock minimalist design. You are invited to celebrate the new home of Kelsey Reed. The phone calls started almost immediately. My family was confused. My mom called first. Kelsey, darling, this invitation is lovely, but who are you house-sitting for? Did one of your little boutique clients hire you to manage their home? Then Logan called, his voice thick with that familiar mocking amusement. A housewarming, sis, seriously? Are we celebrating that you finally upgraded your studio apartment? Don't tell me you're throwing a party for a rental? I just smiled into the phone. You'll have to come and see Logan. I really want you to be there. They came. Of course they came. They wouldn't miss a chance to see what new, pathetic thing I was doing. They walked in together, Gregory, Patricia, and Logan, and they froze just inside the doorway. I watched them from across the room. I watched their eyes travel up the floating glass staircase, over the massive modern chandelier, to the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over their neighborhood. My mom's hand went to her throat. Logan's smirk just evaporated. I had hired caterers. Smooth jazz was playing. The house was filled with my Real Circle influencers, designers, my business partner, Chloe, all the people who knew exactly who I was. My family looked lost. They saw me across the room wearing a custom black dress from my own collection greeting guests. My father, Gregory, recovered first. He walked over, his face a mask of confusion. Kelsey, he said, his voice low. Who owns this place? Did you finally land a rich guy? My mom and Logan followed, their eyes wide. Are you working this event? My mom whispered. Are you the event planner? I let them simmer in that confusion for another hour. I watched them walk around picking up glasses of champagne, whispering to each other. Then I picked up a glass and tapped it lightly with a spoon. The music softened. The conversations died down. Everyone turned to look at me as I stood on the bottom step of that glass staircase. Hi everyone, I said, my voice clear and steady, ringing through the open-concept living room. Thank you all so much for coming. I looked right at my family. At Logan, who was staring at me like he'd never seen me before. At my mom, who was clutching her purse. I know there's been some confusion about tonight, I continued. I know some of you thought I was house-sitting, or maybe that I was working the event. I smiled. But I'm so happy to be here. In my house. I let that hang in the air. I bought it 2 weeks ago. You could have heard a pin drop. My mom's face went completely white. My dad just stared. Logan looked like he'd been physically struck. I'm sorry, Logan stammered, his voice cracking. You, what? My little fashion hobby, I said, raising my glass to him. It turned out to be quite practical after all. For a few weeks, there was just silence. The party had sent a shockwave through my family, and the fallout was a deafening quiet. I didn't hear from any of them. No angry voicemails, no texts demanding an apology. Nothing. I was fine with that. I poured myself into my work, into my new home. I'd sit in my glass-walled office sketching new designs, watching the sunset paint the Raleigh sky, and for the first time in my life, I felt at peace. I was breathing air that wasn't thick with judgment. Then one Tuesday afternoon, the intercom at my front gate buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked at the security feed and my stomach clenched. It was them. Gregory, Patricia, and Logan. My father, my mother, and my brother. They weren't angry. They looked broken. My father's shoulders were slumped. My mother, Patricia, was visibly trembling, her hand clutching his arm. Logan, my golden boy brother, looked hollow. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a gray, sickly pallor. Curiosity more than anything made me buzz them in. They stood in my enormous marble entryway, looking small and out of place. Kelsey, my mother started, her voice a dry whisper. We need to talk to you. We're in trouble, my father said, his voice flat. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I just waited, my arms crossed. It was an investment, Logan muttered, staring at my hardwood floors. A tech startup. It was a sure thing. Everyone was in on it. He lost everything, my mother cut in, her voice cracking. He lost all of it. I don't understand, I said. What does that have to do with me? My father finally looked up, and the shame in his eyes was staggering. We backed him, he said. We co-signed the loans. We leveraged our house. The house in North Hills. Of course they did. They had always backed him. They had always bet on the golden boy. The bank is calling in the debt, my mother continued, tears now streaming down her face. They're foreclosing. We're going to lose the house. We're going to lose everything. And then it came. The real reason they were here. Kelsey, my father said, taking a step toward me. You're doing so well. This house. We know you have money. You're the only one who can help us. I just looked at them. The three people whose approval I had craved my entire life. The people who had defined my worth by my perceived failures. In my mind, I was right back at that dining table. My mother's laugh, you'll never own a house like your brother. My father's dismissal, stick to your little fashion hobby, Jillian. And Logan, his sharp cutting smirk, she'll be broke forever. They weren't asking for help. They were demanding a bailout from the person they had written off. They had come to their worthless burden to be their cash cow, just as they'd always secretly seen me. I looked at my father's desperate face, at my mother's tears, at my brother's hollowed-out shame, and I felt nothing. No, that's not true. I felt peace, the peace of a decision finally made. I took a step back toward the door. Get off my property. The words were quiet, not angry, not dramatic. They were just final. Kelsey, please, my mother sobbed. You have to help us, Logan whispered. We're family. No, I said, opening the door for them. We're not. You made that clear a long time ago. I watched them walk out. I watched them get into their car, three broken people. I didn't know anymore. As I closed that heavy glass door, the finality of it settled over me. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I'd spent my whole life being told that blood is everything. That family is a bond you can't break. But I realized that's a lie we tell ourselves to justify staying in pain. This wasn't revenge. I didn't feel any joy in their ruin. This was self-preservation. My home, my success, my peace, these were things I had built not from spite but for survival. This house was my boundary made of glass and steel. I finally understood that you have to be willing to cut ties with the people who hurt you, even if they share your blood. You have to be brave enough to let go of your bloodline in order to finally find yourself. That day, I wasn't the broken daughter anymore. I was just free.